later in life when I had a girlfriend, but the
See?
guitar
Life
people don't
skills.
want to listen to that.
Hello and welcome to Game of Nodes, a weekly podcast from independent validator teams on the Cosmos and especially on its drama, and doubly so, I think, in the last couple of weeks. With us this week, we've got friend of the show, Ghost from Whisper Node, who is a fan of the what's the phrase you use, Null? Shoveling on Twitter? No,
Shoveling
sledging.
shit, sledging.
Sledger.
Right.
Yeah, big all-star sledger on Twitter, sledging for justice, and we've got Moultrie Audits with us as well. Noel, do you want to? First of all, we have some follow-up from last week, which is that you and Serp have gone and watched Master and Commander. So
What the fuck you bring this up first thing?
it's on the spreadsheet. We've got follow-ups. You know, it's important.
Yeah.
I want a full breakdown before we continue with serious business.
It's important to be consistent. Did you watch it? I watched it immediately after the last show.
I watched all 16 hours of it.
Yeah, that's what it seemed like. It actually took me an entire day to watch, on and off. It was that fucking painful.
Well,
But,
I guess I need to watch it now.
I fell asleep like 4 times, so I think actually the running time was 16 hours. I just kept falling asleep like in the middle when what's his face was getting the bullet pulled out. But I did watch it. Yes, I think we should follow up on that.
Look, I think overall it was a reasonable movie. I don't know if it's like movie of the year, like Defray claims, but look, Russell Crowe's a great actor. I don't think you could put him in any movie and it'd be shit. So the fact is that they were out at sea for a very long time. Not much happened. They chased the friggin' boat around for 3 hours, it seemed like, and some people died. There was some emotional scenes. It was shit.
It just reminds me of that South Park episode. That's all I could think every time I hear Russell Crowe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Masturbator and Commander. Yeah. Look, it was sad when that little kid dude died. That was probably the only time that I did up there. Look, Defray probably knows the little kid's name and like the shanty they sang when they had the funeral, pushed them off the edge or whatever. I liked it. They just dump people in the water when they die. That was that movie, right?
Yeah.
Just like tip them off the edge. Was that movie or was that another movie?
Yeah.
What else they gonna do with the bodies?
Yeah, I don't know. Take them home.
Well, no.
Go to an island and bury them. I don't know.
Cause disease on the ship, wouldn't they?
They just commit them to the deep. See you
Well,
later.
Yeah,
Shark bait.
Off you go.
I mean, nobody can be surprised at these reviews, right? So it's a movie about English naval warfare, and you're asking both an Australian and a Yankee, right? So obviously we're coming from a point of a little bit of negativity. Null calls out the only Australian in the movie as being a great actor. No shit. Wow, I didn't know that. I didn't see that one coming about Russell Crowe.
He basically held the whole movie together.
Of course he did. Yeah, exactly. Paul Bettany is a great actor, right? I think.
Which one was he?
That is the Doctor.
Oh yeah, no, he's also a good actor.
I think we were talking about him from Margin Call, right? So he's just a great actor. I think he's really cool. I was trying to find I was hoping that they would run into each other and both ships would go down. That was actually kind of the ending I was looking for. But I figured that would not be. You can't have both the English and the French ships just head down, but didn't happen.
He had a bone to pick with that other fella, didn't he?
He did.
So other notable characters in there was like Frodo or something, which was there was one of those big feeted lads in there, wasn't there? Had lots
One
of
of the
scars on his
hobbits.
face. Yeah.
Was there a hobbit in there? Oh yes,
There was a hobbit.
Yes.
Yeah. Who else did I recognize? I don't know.
I should know who that is.
Dead people.
Yeah, it was fun. I thought there was some I could see where the 200 million went. There was some really great cinematography, especially like in those close battles structure with the cannons going off. All that kind of stuff was good. The close encounter type stuff with the shaky cam and all that stuff is a little bit ches, but I thought the up stuff close was pretty good as well. It was significantly gory. It had some gore in there, right? Like guy getting shot in the head, and you got
Yeah, it wasn't really.
sword fights and things like that.
I could have like appreciated, more matter, like more gray matter on the headshots.
Yeah.
It wasn't like a whole lot of spatter, and it was just like, presumably those balls make big holes. So
I would think so.
yeah, I don't know.
Plus, they're going
Who's
slow,
that?
right? So they're doing a little bit more damage as like blunt force object than just something passing through something. But,
Yeah.
So anyway, I think
So not entirely realistic is what we're saying.
I think we're both agreeing to, or what we saw last week, which is agreeing with IMDb, is that this movie is perfectly average.
Decidedly average, yeah.
All right, that is the end of and that's most. I think that's a majority of Game and Node's opinions on Master and Commander. So I think that's GON gives this movie a perfectly 7.5 out of 10.
7.25.
I love watching the phrase face during all this conversation. It's just amazing.
He's just taking it in. He's planning his revenge later on.
You can't be right about everything, can you? So things that Null is right about accounting, things that Usurper is right about network switches, things that both of you are right about not movies. I can take that. I don't get many movie recommendations off you two, so but
did you watch Two Hands? I'm pretty sure I recommended Two Hands. Did you watch that?
No. Did we talk about Two Hands?
Yeah, we talked about Two Hands. It's in the show notes somewhere.
Really? The Heath Ledger
How would you
movie.
know? You never look at the show notes. You never help guide the ship. It's always mutiny from you.
I said put the thing so we can contribute, and you just don't do it. You just have to make it a team thing, a brand. What? You make it a brand, and we can have more than one member. I wrote it in the I wrote it in the Discord.
It's not in the spreadsheet.
It is definitely significantly not in the spreadsheet.
Yeah, it's definitely.
It's in the Discord. I said change it to a brand, and then we can all contribute.
All right, so that's our
the YouTube
next week.
Yeah, we can fix it.
So you're talking about Two Hands with Heath Ledger, right? Like another
Two Hands Heath Ledger.
So another average movie.
It is an easy 9.5, to be fair.
All right.
I mean, watch it.
Yeah, I will watch that purely so that I can tell you something you love is a 7.5.
All right.
Look, it's got Heath Ledger in it. So I recommend you go and watch all 7,952 hours of Home and Away as well.
So then my homework for this week is to find a movie that I think is amazing that IMDb shows as a 7.0. And that'll be then for week 3, I'll put something forward.
I feel like a 5 has to be average out of 10. That was 7.5 average.
On IMDb though, like there's some pretty
but 5 is like terrible.
Yeah.
A 5 is the middle.
Like,
5 is average.
Yeah, but see, that's the thing. Like the average isn't really the average. It's just shit.
That's like
if it's below a 7.
It's like restaurant ratings. Like 3.5 walk.
Don't eat.
Like on IMDb, 5 is the floor. So
5 is pretty miserable.
Yeah,
all right.
It's like,
anything's less.
It's like a well-known thing in reviews how they massively skew like into that final quadrant, so that that's why you need the 0.5s, because otherwise it's basically impossible to actually arrive at a rating. But it's like but it's why if you go to like the Edinburgh Fringe or like a comedy festival, why it's really noticeable that they also give 1s and 2s, because 2 is it genuinely is shit, like don't go see it, but 1 is it's such a car crash, you should probably go see it. And like,
so I was going to say the same thing about IMDb. When you're getting down to like the 2.53 mark, we're looking at cult classics. So
yeah, that's true.
I mean, you got to watch those.
Yeah, but the Room probably
that decidedly shit. It's probably good.
But some of that stuff that rates pretty high on IMDb, but the like the critic reviews are awful, right? Like that's usually the opposite. Cult classic usually means everybody loves it. And they put high
actually, Noel's kind of got a point here. The Room has got 3.6 out of 10.
So cult classics don't become highly rated until later. When they first come out, they're rated dog shit because they're crap.
Yeah, right.
But they become cult classics, right? So because like only a few people like them.
Again,
that's why they're cult.
Then again, one of the best bad films of all time, Miami Connection, has a perfect average of 5.6, yet it is objectively one of the most hilarious and batshit films ever made. I've
never seen that.
Miami Connection It is
I've seen this. It's been a
Yeah.
while.
absolutely
I'm
amazing.
already done.
It opens with the guy who made it was this guy called Grandmaster YK Kim, and the only available surviving copy is from like one that was made to be submitted to award shows.
Yeah.
And normally then the team and stuff will be there, and it just opens with a cold open of Grandmaster YK Kim is not in attendance, and then it just plays the film, and then right at the end, and then there's loads of stuff that happens. It's crazy, and there's lots of violence and kung fu and stuff. Well, not kung fu, taekwondo, I think, if memory serves. Really specifically, I think it's taekwondo, and they basically saw that Bruce Lee and stuff. It was around that time had gotten popular, and they're like, we need that for taekwondo. So they like remortgaged their house and made this film, and it's got like this 40-year-old grandmaster who's supposed to be an American high school kid.
Yeah,
it is amazing, and the stunts are also actually really good. But the whole premise is mental. And then right at the end, it just says, like again, cold finish. Only through the elimination of violence will we achieve world peace. End of the film.
That's it.
It is absolutely sensational. There are ninjas that deal cocaine in it. It's like, and there's the dialogue is insane. Like this whole like thing goes down, and this guy just goes, ninjas. He's just like so annoyed. He's like, ugh.
It sounds a lot like a 5 to me.
Oh no,
I was gonna say, yeah.
It's like, you know that film Raw that we were talking about now?
Yeah.
The one with all the lions and shit. It's like that kind of mental where you're just like, how did this get made? This is awesome.
I want to watch that new like Bollywood-esque movie RRR.
I haven't heard of that.
Yeah, it's like, I think it's new. If it's
What's it
got
called?
good dubs, I'll watch it. RRR, just 3 R's. R.
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 That's R for
R, but
not
Indian
Australians.
style.
Have you ever heard or seen of seen Turkish Star Wars?
No.
I gotta hear this.
So
No.
So the reason I know about all these totally weird films is because I used to go. There was a film night which was just like literally lost weird films that should never have happened. Like Lady Terminator, that is a brilliant film. Like my favorite fact about Lady Terminator. So it's not a robot from the future. It's a sorceress queen from the past. Lady Terminator. It's like this B movie. I think it was made in like Indonesia or something like that. And one of the people who was in it thought it was going to be a big deal, so he changed his name so that his name wouldn't collide. You know how the Americans have that thing where you will have to have a unique name or something in the Actors Guild. So he thought he had a quite common name, and it was already taken. And he thought this film was going to be such a big deal. He changed his name. And what did he change his name to? He changed his name to Alvin Stardust, and he's credited. And it has if you go and look up.
Maybe we should move on.
Lady Terminator. Okay.
All right.
Soy too onto it. He's like, we're gonna bore everyone to death before we actually get to what we're talking about.
So to sum up, we do have some homework for next week for that Heath Ledger movie, right? That's what we talked about.
Yeah, and I think we should all watch RRR.
All right. Well, it's just released this year, but yeah, I can make that happen.
I like how I didn't even say anything. I already got roasted in the chat immediately.
I was actually going to say, so we've gotten people on to talk about specific things, and we're still just talking the same shit from last week.
Welcome to Game of Nodes.
Yeah.
I did do other homework too. I picked up Debt First 5,000 Years. Although I didn't realize how thick this book was, which was
It's a big boy.
5,000 or 500?
boy.
Because I have it written down in my journal.
5,000 years.
So
5,000 years of debt. So that's why it takes like the better part of a year to read. I'm like halfway through. So.
I thought I was going to read it for. I thought I was going to read it for this week, and then it showed up. And I was like, okay, maybe December Game of Nodes.
And the other thing is that like you go to sleep per chapter as well. So
like Master
maybe
Commander.
per half chapter. Yeah, pretty much. It takes 14 goes per scene. Mm-hmm. So, whenever you're feeling like highly energetic and, people want you to settle down, just read half a chapter, you'll be out.
Perfect.
I did order the rest of those books. Actually, some showed up quite quickly. Yeah. Thanks, Amazon.
Which ones?
That's
I don't the Skunk Works and the other one.
I had the Kryptonians on my list, and I had Death the First 5,000 Years, but
Yep.
I remember hearing about Skunk Works last week. Yeah.
Oh, no Zen for you, Ghost. You didn't go ordering the what would you call those type of books, Usurper? The Zen books.
Taoist
The,
philosophy.
Yeah, philosophy. Yeah.
Well, it's also Taoist. It's not Zen. Isn't well. Okay, exposing my potential ignorance. Isn't Zen Buddhism? And obviously Tao Te Ching is Taoism.
yes.
Yes, thank you.
Although obviously there is there is a synergy between the two in the sense of the two are often combined with animism in certain parts of East Asia to create sort of a compound folk religion, I guess.
Holy shit! Can we move on?
Term for that.
I should know more about this.
Let's
since
get to the
I'm
content.
Chinese, but I don't. So
I'm waiting for you to look at the spreadsheet and take us on, Noel. Come on.
We
Don't even have it
forward to your
open.
Tweets. Yeah.
Okay, let me open it up. So just talk amongst yourselves for a second.
Okay, well, I guess like if we're doing if we're just doing follow-ups and talk and kind of like events of the week, I think the Tornado Cash USDC fracas is probably worth mentioning at the top of the show because that's fun, isn't it? I mean, I know it's not directly related to the Cosmos, but it raises a lot of questions, doesn't it?
Hang on. So you're telling me to go back and look at the spreadsheet? Literally, the only thing on the spreadsheet is Master and Commander.
That's because I added that.
That's basically the equivalent of a Game of Nodes Rickroll, by the way.
oh man.
Fucking hell. Yeah. So anyway, sorry.
All right, keep going.
No. You guys just move it on. The fray. Move it on. Come on. Let's go.
Tornado
Are we
Cash.
doing Tornado Cash or not?
Yeah,
tell us
We're
Tornado
doing
about
Tornado
Cash,
Cash.
All right.
Maybe.
I'm taking the position here of annihilationism. I mean, we all knew that this was going to happen sooner or later with products like Tornado Cash and front end services. So I don't see this as a big deal whatsoever. I mean, you can just reinstantiate contracts like this, do the exact same thing. There's tons of services that offer stuff like Tornado Cash. You can basically do the same stuff using Secret Network as it is. So I don't view this as a big deal whatsoever.
Do you think that there's well, maybe more for the Americans, but there's more, the significance is more about the effect on open source code than it is about the actual service itself and whatnot? Like the press.
Well, I mean, like why wouldn't we just build a product where you could, in a censorship resistant way, share your code? I mean, like we're doing stuff like that with Akash. I know there's Gitopia, which is doing the same thing as well. So I think that these products will be out soon, and this is kind of a non-issue. I have a background actually in the DoD and NSA, so I think people get overhyped about like offensive campaigns domestically in the U.S. when this is the best they could do. You know what I mean? Is like go after a few addresses, and not much is going to come of it, in my opinion. Just kind of to scare people. Hopefully, in their eyes, nobody will understand that they're technically deficient to actually stop the back-end processes from running. And so they're trying to make a show out of it and cause a stir.
Of course. Wasn't it something like $500 million almost in assets, though, that are now basically blacklisted, in theory, worthless if AMMs and all that just decide to not honor them because they're tainted addresses now?
Yeah. And, that's those people's fault for relying on services that could be censored, as harsh as that sounds. That's just the reality of it.
Yeah.
Do you think that people maybe didn't see that risk when they were interacting? Because it's the bottleneck there is USDC, right? And I think my low opinion of USDC has already been on the show in the past, but like that could have been any fiat off ramp that is centrable, right? So there is a question here of like, there's an interesting question, I suppose, other than like doing what I remember people used to do back in the early Bitcoin meetups in like 2012, 2013, where they were literally swapping it in person and paying cash, which in hindsight, holy shit, that was really weird. That was a really weird period. But at the time, completely normal to go to a crypto meetup and see people swapping it by, essentially handing it off. But like, what is the systemic solution to that kind of thing? Is there one? I guess not if you write fiat, right?
Yeah. I think we actually do need, if you're going to rely on crypto as a payment in the context of like a domestic economy, you do need stablecoins tied to that native currency. And the reality is, like, Do Kwon failed, but I didn't think that was a fruitless effort. And I don't think there's any reason like why Terra actually had to fail. I know that's a super controversial opinion, but something needs to take its place as a decentralized cryptocurrency. Even if it is over collateralized, like I know Rye has a pretty interesting model that hasn't failed yet. So maybe that's going to be the standard, but we need a decentralized stablecoin. Or we just have to accept, like, look, we're not going to be able to pay for US services, and there's not going to be as much of a intermingling financially between Web 2 and Web 3, which I'm also fine with.
Yeah. No, Shade had a Twitter space earlier today. It was like 3 or 4 hours ago. I hopped in. I was kind of half listening, but Tornado Cash was, of course, the biggest and main subject, and just the need to have Silk deployed faster. Of course, they need to make sure everything's robust and working and actually survivable. And then there came the question of, well, what happens if the US decides to go after anybody that's in the US working on this project? Are there other people in other countries? What happens if all of a sudden you get this cross-border coalition? It raises all sorts of questions. You mentioned Gitopia and Akash. I'm really excited for Gitopia, where Whisper Note's going to be a part of the testnet, of course. I think it has a lot of potential. When those GitHub accounts got taken down, it's kind of a big hit for developers everywhere. You look at that and go, like, okay, everything I just worked on or everything I contributed to can just be completely taken away. But it's a centralized service. They absolutely have the authority to do that. And, all it takes is a subpoena or whatever, and that's it. So PC kicked on.
That noise everybody hears is Ghost's air conditioning, because he lives on the surface of the sun, where the current temperature is somehow north of
it's like 110
degrees Celsius.
Pretty
was
much.
Was 110?
Was
Fahrenheit. 110 in real
it's
money?
Like, I don't know. It's like 40. I don't know, 40 something Celsius, roughly.
I remember I've been to Arizona once, and I remember it's so hot you literally would like dash between like shade, and then just be like, right, fuck it, we're in some shade, and then you'd be like, fuck, there's no more shade. I literally cannot.
I ran to my mailbox, which is like 600 feet away in my community, and then I went to the Chevron, which is another 400 feet away. And between there and coming back, I was already like drenched in sweat.
It's literally the floor is lava there, like
So
the
don't go
asphalt.
outside.
No, it's just all lava. Yeah, there is no floor. It's just lava everywhere.
So, do you guys mind if I go on like a 30-second to 45-second tirade on what Dylan Schultz put in?
Yeah, hang on.
Yes, it was
hang on. So, welcome,
today.
Brendan. Welcome. Haven't welcomed you yet, mate. So, welcome in. You didn't miss much to begin with. We were just talking about Master and Commander for another half an hour. So Dylan Schultz has put up here. So, jeez. Stop it. Okay. So for the people who are listening, Dylan Schultz has put up the question, really doesn't need to be stable off the USD. And then the further question was, that's stable off the euro, though. I think we're talking about e-money. Why not stable off a basket of goods? So I guess potentially, for example, from Defund or something like that. So Shade. So Moldry, you were, did I say that right? Moldry?
Moultrie, that's named after
sorry.
a revolutionary flag of the U.S.
Oh, nice. Moultrie, you had a tirade to go on. Please continue.
Yeah, a positive tirade.
Okay.
So the first thing is, like, there are obviously cryptocurrency stablecoins that aren't based off the U.S. dollar, like Rye, which is tagged to this arbitrary number on Ethereum. I'm kind of bearish, though, on like basket of goods services, because if you think about what the dollar already is it's just a way to mediate value between two unrelated goods and services across time and space. So like how many oranges is worth one donkey? Like you have no idea, and you can eat all those oranges at once. So that's why money is useful. So if inflation happened instantaneously, it wouldn't make a difference because you're still measuring the value between two goods and services. But the problem is because it doesn't happen instantaneously, it distorts markets as that process occurs, particularly financial markets.
If I could interject there, so if inflation happens instantaneously, that would affect a market, for example. It depends on if that happens on a global scale. Like if we're talking just America, yeah, sure, the USD is only, relevant to people in America and a lot of other people being a global reserve. However, if I keep all of my money, for example, in a USD pegged asset and there's a lot of inflation in America, that'll drive down the value compared to my country's native asset, let's say, unless we get a similar amount of inflation, right? So
exactly, yeah.
I think there is
everywhere uniformly instantaneously. Just the fact that the dollar price went up wouldn't make a difference because
if everyone else has changed relatively, yeah,
exactly.
But I mean, when you're in a situation where the US is printing a lot of money and staring at potentially quite a bit of inflation over the next 5 to 10 years. And other countries may not be in a similar situation, then there's going to be some devaluing of their currency against the US currency, particularly if it happens quickly. So, I guess a potential advantage of a grab bag of stable assets to, various currencies in certain proportions would be that there would be at least some sort of inflation protection against, any single currency, but also, providing the same sort of thing. It's just not pegged to a US dollar.
Yeah, if it was pegged to other currencies as well, in addition to the US dollar, that would be interesting. But a basket of goods pegs to try and protect against inflation, I don't think makes sense because the dollar already is mediating against those goods and services. So then,
yeah, like a basket of actual. So when you say a basket of goods, we're talking like a basket of some Juno and some Osmosis and some Bitcoin and some, I don't know, Tesla shares or whatever. So yeah, I guess they are then different things. Like one is a basket of stocks and other things, really, and then the other one is a basket of currencies, I guess.
Well, I mean, I guess that's more like collateralizing or like an ETF or a traded fund. Whereas like when this is done at currency level in traditional macroeconomics, it's done against specific consumer goods.
Exactly.
So petrol, orange juice, bread is the big one. Like bread, milk. Like every country in the world, pretty much, unless they hate milk, which I think is relatively rare, is probably have bread and milk on the list of consumer price goods that they're using to assess inflation and then work against. But we have a pretty good well studied example of how this can play out in practice, and a lot of the pitfalls with it, which is the euro. I mean, and the problems of the eurozone in tracking consumer price inflation in a series of pretty heterogeneous economies that function in very, very different ways has like not always been plain sailing by any means. And the problem there has primarily been it's been a lot of different things. Obviously, everybody has an opinion. My opinion is it's all about, convergence, and it's a lack of investment in certain areas while still, wanting essentially to bring people into the single market. But I guess that's the question here. Like when we're talking about inflation and stuff in the context of things we need to be aware of in the space that we're in, what do we care about? Do we care about purchasing price of the average consumer? Is that why we think inflation is an issue, or do we? What is the other reason for being worried about inflation? Because my instinctual reaction to inflation is it only matters as far as it affects purchasing power, right? How many Big Macs can I buy for one Juno, if you like, which is the Economist's famous metric, isn't it? Like the Big Mac index. Like if we started going like, okay, how's Juno doing in terms of how many Big Macs I can get? That's the problem, isn't it? Because we'd be talking about the US or we'd be talking about different countries, but we'd still be talking about purchasing power. So, like, could you do a compound index of that, or do we not give a shit about purchasing power? Don't know.
So, I mean, it matters in terms of preservation of value, right? So your purchasing power is the value of the currency relative to other things. So, I mean, there's a problem with just, you know, picking one and rolling with it. There can be, granted, USD is the big one, but yeah, it's relative inflation is the issue, not just inflation and purchasing power of one single currency.
Yeah.
Because, you know, this is a global scale. Like, sometimes we tend to forget that the entire crypto universe doesn't just exist in America, and it's on a global scale, right? So it's not about the relative purchasing power of just one currency. It's on a global scale. So, you know, what affects me in Australia might not affect, you know, Ghost in America so much. Like, if the US dollar goes up 100%, then, you know, obviously that would come along with some kind of income on savings and that type of stuff, and it might not affect them so much as if the US dollar say I've got all my money in USDC and the US dollar goes up 100% and Australia stays relatively stable, then I've lost 50% of the value of that relative to my currency.
I think actually too, like, inflation matters most in supply side economics. It's like, I'll draw a little graph here. If you can't see it, I'll just give up. But like,
Immediately.
can you see that?
Yes.
So like, if you have demand one and supply one meeting, like, that is going to be the free market rate for something. And then, like, what inflation actually does is drive up demand, because the expectation that goods and services will be more expensive in the future incentivizes you to spend the goods and services now. So demand rises to demand two, right over here, which pushes up the price of goods and services as demand rises relative to supply. So supply rises to meet the increased demand. But if the money printing ever stops, demand will fall back to the free market rate, and you actually experience deflation or relative deflation. So the second intersection right here is the new rate. So it's lower than the original one. So then you have the issue of a broken supply chain of people who purchase the goods and services ahead of time aren't continuing to purchase. Therefore, layoffs occur, supply shortages occur. At the same time, prices are going to begin to fall, because the artificial demand stimulated in the markets, particularly in financial markets, isn't going to be there at the free market rate. And like, you can see that where asset prices skyrocketed when the Fed started printing in 2020, or just printing more. And then they kind of collapsed as soon as the Fed said they were going to stop. And a lot of stuff fell to pre-COVID levels. So I think that's the issue of inflation primarily.
You just brought me back to like macro 101 and 15 years ago, you know. that was good. I mean,
I have an economic research published on this, so that's the only reason I know anything about this particular issue.
So, like, just one thing I would add, like, in money printing and inflation and supply and demand, is that I don't think that the supply and demand curve, I couldn't see yours properly. Yours had two lines, but I don't think that in a heavy inflation environment that the supply and demand curve is 100% accurate, in that when you're in a situation where the economics is kind of buggered anyway, you've got when you've got like COVID and a lot of unemployment, you're in a, I think this is sort of like the thesis of the new, what do they call it? The money printing thesis. I can't remember what the name of it is. Yeah, well, it's quantitative easing, but they call it like new, it's like new economics or some shit like that. But anyway, when there's like a period of high unemployment,
new economic theory.
Yeah, well, it's called something like, it's something weird, like modern economics or something like that. Anyway, can't hear you, mate. When there's like low employment, you're in a bit of a situation where you can print money to a certain degree to counteract the lack of competition in the marketplace. So
modern monetary theory, right?
Yeah, that's it. Modern monetary theory. So
gotta Google it.
yeah, so how it works is you can print money for a little while there's low unemployment, without driving up inflation too much, because there's reduced marketplace competition. And as you print money and distribute it in a fair and equitable way to the people, then they can then create some competition in the marketplace to either keep prices stable or slightly push them up. But you can only do it for so long until you've flooded so much money supply into the market and not producing anything because people are unemployed, that it all sort of goes a little bit to shit.
Well,
which is at the point where we're at now.
If you're primarily doing it via credit as well, that's the other problem.
Yeah.
Because
sorry, who disagrees?
I think we probably both disagree for different reasons. I'll let Moultrie go first.
I'm an anti-monetarist for sure. So like I would reject the idea that printing money could ever not lead to more inflation. You might not see CPI increase in terms of a percentage, but it would always have to be higher than it otherwise would have been if you weren't printing money. So that would be my counterclaim.
DeFray, you also had something to say?
Yeah, I mean, actually a very similar point, which is that like you're always going to cause inflationary pressure with measures like that, whether you're moving on the demand side or the supply side. And my issue with MMP is more that because it operates almost entirely in practice along the lines of like essentially credit. It's actually not, it's basically the unsustainable nature of the way in which you're stimulating demand to create the illusion of growth that is actually the problem. And this kind of comes back to purchasing power, because the other way of changing purchasing power, which also is inflationary because all these things are, is actually to allow wage inflation to happen. And one of the big things that's happened from the 1970s onwards is a fall in real wages. And like that is a big reason why I think ordinary people have this idea that inflation is bad, is because what they associate with that is the decline in purchasing power on a measure of real wages, which you can see a lot of different problems that come along from that, and primarily the replacement of buying power with credit, which has obviously been accelerating since the 20s onwards. And I am not enough of an economic scholar on the history of credit to talk on it in any meaningful depth, but that replacement has its own impact in terms of the movement of the macro demand and supply. And it's a complex system, so obviously it's not just like, oh, you move one thing and then you move this other thing.
No, there's a lot of moving parts. Yeah.
But you have to choose which of those, what kind of level of stimulus you're trying to push in which direction, I guess. Although I'm still not 100% sure what this has to do with Tornado Cash, but
oh yeah, we get lost in the weeds quite often.
Drifted.
So I know, like in Australia, like we're sort of just starting to experience the inflation now a little bit, but we've got stagflation and I think America's probably in the same situation. Like there's no real wage growth in Australia at the moment, but we are seeing quite a bit of like price pressure on consumer goods, and it is a lot to do with how we did our inflation here, but also cheap credit at the same time. People here have gone absolutely fucking mad and just borrowing money left, right, and center for just consumer goods and stuff like that. So you're in a situation where we've had COVID, supply chains are crunched all over the world. We've kept available money supply by printing money and injecting it into the economy in various ways. And now we've got a lot of people trying to buy stuff. We're hitting a supply crunch. So there's a lot of competition now in the marketplace to buy the same things, recreational stuff and stuff you shouldn't be buying, staring down the face of a depression. And that is just really starting to put a lot of pressure on the market and push prices of everything up. But at the same time, you're not seeing any real wage growth, inflation, or anything like that. So,
I mean, some of that stems from all the logistics and shipping issues in China and all that as well. So it's like combining that with the inflation is just a recipe for disaster. And
yeah, absolutely. And I think that it was done on the, with the view that COVID was a short-term thing and things would be back on track, and global supply chains would be back on track. And now we've got a lot of free cash in the economy and not a lot of production and productivity. So yeah, and all the supply issues and so it's really just culminated in now a lot of competition and price inflation. But yeah, for some reason the wage inflation isn't following it. And I know in Australia that a lot of companies are just profiteering off the idea of inflation, so they don't pay their people more money.
I don't. Just to interject, it is worth saying that Australia is one of the few places I think that has actually had a diminished impact of stagnant or declining real wages in the global north because of your mining and heavy industry. Like for everybody else, that's been declining since like the 80s. But Australia has actually been bucking the trend until, to my knowledge, until relatively recently. So I think it may also be that it's just catching up with the rest of the economic situation that's been experienced elsewhere. I just want to also shout out, we just had a comment from Ben Davis saying the correct way to make a stable coin is to peg it to the price of a Freddo. That is the most stable what's it called, commodity in the universe. So yes, that is a sensible way of making
I thought it was Arizona.
What is that?
What is a Freddo? Yeah.
So one more thing I do want to say, completely unrelated to what we're here to talk about, is that in Australia, at least, companies, I feel, and from some of the stuff I've read, are using the illusion of inflation to actually push their prices up and make bigger margins. So there's no wage growth inflation at the moment, but there is inflation in the price of goods and services. And a lot of that is companies using the talk of inflation to actually push their prices higher and make deeper margins on the same amount of cost base.
So non-facetiously, on Ben's point, a Freddo usurper is a very small sweet. It is a little chocolate about yay high. It's got a frog on it. Freddo the frog.
Holy shit, he doesn't know what a Freddo is?
Yeah, I know. I just assumed everybody had Freddos, but apparently not.
Nope.
But it's always perfectly slightly more than like the absolute cheapest sweet, but slightly less than like a fudge bar, So in terms of purchasing price, the Freddo has been astonishingly consistent for a very, very long period of time.
They haven't shaved off the Freddo over the years, just a little bit here and there.
Well, this is the thing. Okay, look, if anybody knows how many grams a Freddo has been over the past 40 years, so we can track that, because maybe my assumption that the purchasing price of the average child has always been adequate to get you a Freddo a day, maybe that Freddo you get every day is going down in size. So, which would just prove that we're just getting shafted up on center.
Do we have live rewind? Did you just say the purchasing price of a child?
I said the purchasing power. I said the purchasing power.
Oh, the purchasing power.
Yeah.
Sorry, I thought you said purchasing price of a child.
Yeah, the average cost of a child. I was like,
well, the average cost of a child is like what, $100,000 to raise them to high school age, something like that, or something crazy like that.
I think it's in the US it's like $250,000.
$250,000. You got what's the joke from Calvin and Hobbes? There's something like all the money we're using to raise you. You've got to ask Calvin, is that cash in the bank or is that a loan?
Is it Freddo or Fredo?
Fredo.
Fredo. Oh, no, Fredo. Like not, no,
it was you, Fredo.
One, right?
It was you, Fredo.
It's not you. Okay. I really enjoyed your Big Mac Juno. I was looking at how many Big Macs the Juno was at, and this week it's gone from about 0.8 Big Macs to 1.21 Big Macs. And actually, just now it just crossed over 1.22 Big Macs since we've been on this call. That's amazing. I hope we can get.
Is there an index?
This is why
I'm going to create one. This is.
I was going to say, yeah.
Yeah, we should create one because
GameOfNodes.com/Big Mac.
Can we put that on the Game of Nodes website just as a background in
the Juno BMI?
The Juno BMI. That's right. So we're at right now. I'm just doing the math. We're at 1.22 BMI, which is pretty awesome. I'm hoping we get to.
China's
I mean,
crushing it.
the ATH is like, I don't know, 9 BMI, but that's okay. We'll get there. We'll take 1.25 right now.
Completely unrelated to anything again. Moultrie, since you're here and you said that you work at the DOD, say, what do you know about Bob Lazar?
I don't know anything. I don't work like for the DOD anymore. We do a lot of work related to them. So we're trying to coordinate an announcement from the Pentagon right now about some stuff we did on top of secret in Akash, but press release hasn't come out yet, so I've just been sitting on it. But hopefully we'll get some cool stuff, not related to any controversial political figures or anybody else out.
Dang it. I was hopeful. I thought you might have some insider information that you'd be, willing to share on a live podcast.
Maybe Brendan does.
I don't know anything.
Yeah, man, we'll get you on a cyber contract. That's what we'll do. I used to work for Navy, actually, DOD.
Marine Corps. Oh, Navy. Don't get me started now. Were you a SWO?
Yeah.
SWO subs, pilot?
None of the above. Just
Well, the Navy, they're the best place. You guys are at the front line with those UFOs, right?
There's some funny military stereotypes about the Navy, but won't get into it.
boat full of seamen. I mean,
Inside
my
a
dad's a
secret
master
between
chief, so my dad's going just on his 30 years, about to retire, and I always give him shit for loving.
I take back everything, Ghost. I take back it all.
I take it all back. Okay. Right. So do we want to move on then to the next topic that we're coming up with topics as we're talking? We're building out the spreadsheet. So let's move on to some validator related stuff. How about Sybils, guys? So I think we're discovering that there are, we've got the Huobi, Sybil.
Yep.
What network was that on? Was that
that is Cosmos Hub? So it's in theory, it's not technically a Sybil because they're openly doing it.
Does that make it not a Sybil?
I would say it does make it not a Sybil.
Technically, yes, but it's still the same concept. They're taking up 2 slots.
So what would you suppose that the purpose of that is? To have 2 validators?
Being so rich that you're like, let's spread our risk.
Fuck it, I can do it. The ICF's on my side.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's actually the only confusing part about this to me. Like, I actually don't think that this is, I'm open to changing my mind, but I don't think this is bad that they have 2 validator nodes. That's me and Ghost, I think, disagree about this. But the only confusing thing is about why they would do 2, because if you're paying for 1 piece of infrastructure and you have 100,000 tokens delegated to you, that's going to be more cost effective than splitting it between 2 and having 58 each. So I'm just not sure why they're doing it, but I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing. And we can get into that.
I think if you have a lot of tokens delegated, like the cost of infrastructure, etc., becomes relatively not an issue.
I mean, they could run a Hetzner for $40-$50 a month, and it's trivial to them. They don't.
Just any new validators out there listening, for God's sake, don't use Hetzner. Just pick something else.
Yeah, no more Hetzner.
Yeah, everybody on this is using it, so let's
So obviously we have also a bunch of other validators that are like white labels, right? So, I mean, what do we think about that? Do we consider that a Sybil if it's not disclosed, or does it not really matter? Does it matter because it's the same operator? Like, are we looking at the inherent risk of that and potentially that they're all in the same place running the same sort of, methodology with their infrastructure and that type of stuff? So any comments on that?
Well, there's a reason the Juno Delegations Handbook specifically says if you are not running your own infra, or if you're a white label, both the white labeler and the person who is getting somebody to run their infra for them can't get a delegation from dev, from core, for running other infra, whatever. Doesn't matter. Like, even if you white label a validator and a relayer, you get no points for the relayer because you're white labeling. So it's out of your
You
hands.
just get-
It's out of your control.
How-
Yeah,
how would they know
there's
that?
no accountability and responsibility there. Like, what's the fucking point of Web3 if we're all just going to pay somebody else to run our shit for us? That's fucking stupid.
I disagree. Yeah, here's the thing from my perspective. Yeah, I disagree, and like I don't necessarily disagree. Like if we're talking about from a front end side, it's like on Akash, there's this group called Prater, and they build providers for people, essentially. And so, like to do that, they require you to have attributes on chain that say specific things about you. But there's still the ability to revert to pseudonymity, however you say the word, at the protocol level. And I think that's important. So like if the government was coming for one of our chains and they knew I ran Moultrie, it's going to be really easy to shut me down. But if I paid other people to run things and had it under my name, that does add a level of robustness in terms of keeping the chain going if a nation state was to come after us.
Yeah, but I
Interesting
just don't think that's okay. Well, 'cause it might happen for the Americans, but I think for the rest of us, we're going to get taxed, and then that will be the end of it. They're going to be like, "Oh, thanks, that's quite a bit of money." Yeah, you know what? Just don't rip.
Keep
people
doing what
off.
you're doing.
I mean,
They're going to basically come for us, and they're going to be. It's not going to be like, "Oh, they come for you." It's going to be like, "Hey, man, I hate to tell you this. Here's 50 pages of paperwork you need to fill in now to continue being a validator because, sorry, like we're going to have to do this, and also just a little bit more tax." And you're going to be like, "Oh, that's a pain. Can we afford it?" Yeah, okay, right. I guess I'll move on with my day and continue running servers and living the rock star life of the validator.
I think it depends what's built on top of the protocol and what the protocol is doing. I mean, obviously, something like Secret Network with the whole Tornado Cash debacle that we just had has a little more inherent risk in the government trying to shut down that network because you can perform functions like building a coin mixer on it. And if someone were to build say a dark net or something like that on top of Secret Network or a coin mixer, maybe that product itself is built by like completely anonymous people and there's no way for a government to go after them, but maybe they can go after the validators that are public and the chain itself.
But it's
Well, I
like
guess
in one country though,
That's
right?
fair.
Like the chances of the entire world doing that and all going after the validators of one network is like pretty slim.
And I guess as long as
I-
stakers
yeah.
could switch their delegation, right, as the validators got taken down. I mean,
Yeah.
because this is the thing, right? Like, obviously, that's not good for us as validators, but from the point of view of the network and the point of view of the owners of the network, who are the stakers, it would probably be fine because we are replaceable and we should be replaceable.
Mhm.
So, like, a different way of thinking about this was kind of in the Juno Prop 16 thing, which was not about government censorship, but the fear potentially of legal repercussions, of regulatory repercussions, right? That was much more like, a regulator knocks on your door and shuts you down. That felt to me more likely, at least in our jurisdiction, right? But in that situation, again, the irony here, and the irony we kind of felt at the time, was that if we did get shut down, like stakers would be like, well, first of all, you weren't that hot on Prop 16 anyway, and also we're going to redelegate to somebody else anyway. So not only do you go to jail, but you also lose all your money for a thing that you didn't even want to do. And that was, I think, the huge irony of Prop 16, right? And that was why it was very silly, in my personal view, whatever. But yeah, no, you make a good point about Secret, I guess. But then it's also, I guess, back to my point. That's a weird thing to say. I guess it's kind of fine that we're expendable, right, as validators.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, there's a few things here. Like one, I actually don't think it's unreasonable to assume that a lot of people would come for one chain, especially like something like Ethereum. And like 29 countries shut off the internet in 2020. So like they shut down the internet in the US. We'll see what happens to Ethereum. I don't know what happened. We are expendable.
Ethereum's like a little bit different though to the Cosmos in that it's pretty anonymous. Like
but most of the nodes do run on like AWS and Azure. So,
Oh,
like,
so
you
mass
shut down the
port
internet in the
shutdown.
US. Yeah, because Russia shut down the internet for a period of time in 2020. So like stuff would have just gone offline. And like we think we're expendable. I agree, like at a technical level, but like the reality is how fast could like 60 validators come onto a Koshnet in 1 hour? It's not. I don't think it's going to happen.
Well, I mean, that would just make it centralized anyway, because there's only a
Yeah.
certain amount of cash providers, and they're in the US.
Yeah.
Reference
And
back to. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
sorry, last point. I know I'm rambling on, but we have a guy, Elio Trades, or YouTuber, who had a validator on Akash. He hasn't produced a block in 7 days. Still has 1.3 million AKT delegated to him, and there isn't a foundation delegation. So I'm not super confident in delegators being that involved, especially on smaller chains, to redelegate quickly.
Right. So
That's a
on
good
that
point.
your last one, that's where groups like Cosmos Validators and what's the other one that Jack from Strangelove? One of you guys know.
You mean Validator Commons?
Yeah, Validator Commons. That's kind of what these groups are trying to accomplish, is providing better information for delegators to actually go and make competent decisions. Not pushing our own nodes or anything, but literally just giving them the data and saying, hey, this is what XYZ validator is doing. Here's a much simpler dashboard to look at to make decisions from, because right now you're just inundated with a giant list and I'm just going to pick from the top 10 because they look safe. They all have the same percentage commissions. They're at the floor, are relatively the same. They look the safest, yada yada. Going back to the previous point with validators are replaceable, and tying this back to Tornado Cash, there was actually a point that there were legal implications for even signing a block that then related to Tornado Cash. So any validator, any node that had even processed a transaction that touched Tornado Cash, you're now liable. So if every single node on the network is processing these blocks, how replaceable? Can you really replace all of that?
Yes, and this is where like the Sybil comes into play for me, which is, can you put Rarma's comment up there where he says, okay, so for chain, we end up
I was
with 5
about to say we should probably address that comment.
Okay, so like this is a problem. He's completely correct.
Can I just, because this will go out on a podcast player as well. So Rama has commented, so for a chain, let's say we end up with 5 white label providers doing updates on 50 nodes total. So for most Cosmos chains, that would be like half of the val set, let's say. They fuck up and they halt the chain. Are we okay with that?
And so like my response here is like, that would suck. That is bad. But the alternative to actually being able to prevent somebody from pseudonymously creating other validators would be to have like an access mechanism to join the chain as a validator. And that is a very centralized force. So like you lose permissionlessness as you try and prevent Sybil attacks. And I think that in the hierarchy of values in a blockchain, you should put permissionlessness above that of the risk of a Sybil. Like he's right, that is a problem, but I just don't see how you can fix it without losing permissionlessness.
No, I definitely.
Yeah, I think you can only fix it with social pressure, right?
Yeah, and if it's pseudonymous, like how are you going to catch him?
Right.
Well, the other way you fix it, right, is by having a val set so large that it doesn't matter. Because back to your point, Moultrie, like it actually makes sense both from infra time delegations to just run one node. So there's also the thing of like, if you have I strongly suspect actually the more nodes you have, even in any system where you're involving voting power, the more dumb the idea of even running a Sybil or running multiple nodes becomes from an operational standpoint. So there's also a question of like, when val sets move beyond 100, 200, 300, and that might not be possible with current Tendermint BFT, but is possible in other systems, right?
Yeah, I mean, like the question you bring up a great point is with the Sybil, why do we even care? We don't really theoretically care if there wasn't such competition for those bottom spots. I don't think we'd be going on about it so much if it weren't taking the opportunity away from someone else qualified And if decentralization is the true why we give a shit factor, then like you said, there's some number where we hit 1,000 nodes and it doesn't matter anymore, or 10,000 nodes, whatever that number may be.
For me, that was the biggest reason of calling out Huobi was, I mean, literally a day before, Bro and Bro made a big push. We see them all across the ecosystem. We know they're a qualified validator. They're trusted. A lot of people delegate to them. They contribute to the ecosystem. Yet they can't make it, even to the floor. Meanwhile, you've got a centralized exchange validator that's ICF. They're delegating to them, so they support them. Taking up an additional slot for what reason exactly? I mean, Yeah,
the reality though is they could have just launched that node and said that they were ghost node or whatever, and we wouldn't have known, and then we all would have gone about our days as if everything was perfectly valid.
They could have. The thing is that both of these wallets on both of the nodes tie back 3.5 years and feed into the same exact wallet. So at the end of the day, I mean, there's no disputing that this is.
Yeah. But they could have just used a new wallet.
No,
I'm saying it's kind of abnormal. It's so transparent. But if they just use a new wallet and change their name, they still would have taken Bro and Bro's spot, and we would have thought everything was fine. So if you say don't do that, we're not actually stopping them from doing anything.
They'll find a way. Yeah. No, I definitely get your point. I guess when I use, the term civil in this scenario, it isn't quite the correct term, even though it's very similar in what it's doing.
I guess we're talking about running multiple validators really in this situation, aren't we? We're just I think like Brendan said, the real question here is, even if small, the fact that you're not getting an additional operator when you only have 100 slots, when you only have 150 slots, let's say, is actually, I mean, it's 1/150th of the network is more centralized as a result, which is actually a meaningful amount.
One team that does that, or two teams that do that, and three, and then all of a sudden, this snowballs. If we allow this to,
which is back to the white label point. I think
I was gonna try to bring it back there, Frey, because I was actually curious when you mentioned white labeling and Juno. Do they take active measures to monitor if validators are white labeling? And if so, what would that even look like in terms of how would you even know?
Well, that's a good question. It's something that there are obviously ways of trying to work it out, but at a most fundamental level, it's basically most people are open enough with whether or not they're doing it is number one, which is obviously the easiest thing to do, because I think people are quite obviously fearful of being discovered if they are lying, caught in the act, if you like. But the second thing is also very, very obvious if people are technically qualified or not to, interact with the Linux command line. So that's also a dead clue that you can then go from there to work it out. I think somebody who had more of a actual security background would be able to probably come up with something more sophisticated. Yeah. Both to, do white labeling and get away with it, or also to uncover who was doing what.
Definitely some people dox themselves though anyway.
Lots of people dox themselves as well. But it's also, like I say, it's also pretty obvious who's running a white label and who's not. I think the big like I say, I think it's one of those that I have a problem with the majority of the Valve set, or a significant chunk of the Valve set became white labeled by one or two operators. That would be very bad. And I know there are some very big validator operations who are looking to aggressively expand in the bear market. And that concerns me as somebody who is part of our core team for network stability, because I spend a lot of time thinking about what will happen if the network is down, right? And how bollocked am I going to get on Twitter if it turns out that there were 40 fucking nodes with the same white label? It's be like, what are you guys doing? Are you totally fucking asleep? And it would be like, oh yeah, I guess we are totally fucking asleep, huh?
I was just gonna say, like, I'm curious, as kind of there's been talk about this validator code of conduct type of document that people may put on their own website or on the Cosmos validator, Discord and things like that. Is white labeling something we would include in that code of conduct? Is it something? How do we feel about that in general? I think that would be like a whole nother Game of Nodes episode potentially.
I think the problem with the code of conduct is that it's entirely optional, and a lot of people who do that type of stuff probably wouldn't sign up to the code of conduct anyway. And at the end of the day, who gives a fuck about a code of conduct other than validators? I think it's like pretty much a thing that the majority of delegators would never see or care about, and because they're only interested in their influencer node, right? The person who's making the most noise on Twitter. So they don't care about whether you're a good operator or not, how many nodes you run, any of that shit. All they care about is, did you say the right thing on the Twitterverse? And that's, to be fair, not everybody, but the vast majority of people. So, I don't think it matters what you put on your code of conduct in that sense. I think you can do as much social pressure as you want in the validator sphere of things, between you, me, and the other validators all in that particular group and applying pressure to each other in that way. But at the end of the day, there's going to be outliers who just don't give a fuck and have enough reach anyway. So I don't really, I'm
right.
I'm in two fences with codes of conducts and that type of stuff. It's not. Well, also, it is nice and cuddly to do, and expect that people will abide by it. But at the end of the day, if someone wants to make money, they're going to say "fuck you," throw it to the wall. We don't give a shit. And
perfect throwback.
Well, it's also just like if it's unenforceable, who gives a fuck? Like just putting it out there is potentially like it's just like why?
Yeah.
What and kind of exposing its uselessness is actually kind of like I would like to think that the Needlecast position ourselves as like we're pretty transparent about what we do. We try our best in everything we do, but we're also like not making any promises we're not going to keep to. I doubt we would fucking sign a code of conduct because it would be like, why?
Like at King Nodes, we will apply our own policies because that's what we want to do. We want to abide by our own policies, and we want people to know what they're getting when they delegate to us. But in terms of like an all-encompassing code of conduct for all validators to abide by, I think it's a total waste of fucking time, to be honest.
It's just not going to stick unless it's literally, passed through governance and becomes code.
And also, to be honest, might actually defeat the object of the whole enterprise anyway. Like, it kind of seems to me that if you are able to enforce a code of conduct on like something like obviously Foundation delegations or multi-sig delegations in the case of Juno, like that, obviously it's up to that or that DAO essentially to decide how they want to distribute that money. So they're doing an economic incentive to encourage good behavior or behavior they see as good. Great. That's kind of what we're doing here, I guess. But apart from that, it's like, well, the opposite is true. Actually, you want as many people running as many different nodes in as many different ways as possible, and you probably want as many of them as possible in the longer term too. So, yeah, I don't know.
Well, when you have a decentralized systems of pulleys and ropes, like if you are enforcing anything, it's counter to the ethos of that thing. Like you can't have a decentralized permissionless thing and then try to enforce a rule on it. You can, like you say, incentivize the types of behaviors that you want to see from bodies with a lot of power, but you can't selectively say, this is a decentralized system with no rules. However, you can't run a Sybil, you can't do this, and you can't do that. All we can say is all the other validators think that that's a shitty thing to do, and fuck you for doing it. But at the end of the day, you're going to do it anyway.
Yeah.
So, unless it's in code. If it's in code, then it's law.
Well, that is the only law in this system is the code that we have.
Well, social consensus. Prop 16 showed that it was social consensus.
And then
Yeah.
you'd have to
Well,
actually,
yeah.
But the
But
point
that's
is,
still code,
explain
right?
how you could,
Social
yeah,
consensus
how
that
can you
leads
code
to a
away a
code.
Sybil though?
what's
can't.
that?
How
Well,
could
no,
you,
you can't.
you
Exactly.
can't code away a Sybil, so like that's
So,
the
which
my point,
QED, right? That means you can't stop Sybil's.
I mean you could
you would have
actually,
to
I'd
code
say
in
this.
the ability to
Yeah.
govern
That
socially,
only a
you know,
key,
social
a specific
slashing.
social slashing or a specific key could be the only one to create a validator. Then you could, have this centralized point where validators are corrected or created. So that way I would verify that you are who you say, Ghost, and then now you can have your validator as I sign you through an audited attribute or something like that. But that is very permissioned and anti-cryptocurrency. So in my opinion,
Back to square one.
Back to square one. You got to let Sybil exist. We'll
Well,
call people
so
out when it happens.
Schultzy jumped in the comments to say he disagrees and there should be a method for slashing through governance, picking up on what Ghost said. There should be a way to punish bad behavior. But this is, I think, back to the kind of rough consensus we were arriving at there, which is like, okay, there's two different things going on here. There's what does the code allow you to do? And then there's this big, woolly
What is a community?
social consensus, which at the moment is very largely degens and airdrop hunters, let's be honest. And right, so which kind of it's any system suffers from the culture that engenders it and blah blah blah. Let's not get too postmodern about it, but that's the situation we're in, right? And if that actually changes and we get mass adoption, then the question is, what systems are we going to build, and what is consensus going to say? This is wrong. Write code to correct it, because that's basically how law works ish, with a little bit of wiggling for corporate interests and all the different ebbs and flows of power dynamics in a society, right? It's basically a combination of different things that are forming a social contract, right? So, but we're still so early that nobody, apart from the validators, maybe in the devs, and a few engaged people, and the very clever people, obviously, that are listening to this podcast, watching it on YouTube or Twitter, and commenting in the comments, are obviously thinking about, because we get a lot of tweets and things about subjects just like this. But like, I think the majority of the users in the space are not thinking about those things yet. They're not thinking about like governance as actual governance, like other than in very exceptional circumstances, like maybe Prop 16 was one of those.
Just also shout out to all of the people listening and watching our podcast. Thanks for coming, and just know that you are alphas. You are going to make it. If you're not watching this,
and don't invest in Echelon, whatever you do.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
so I called this one. We're doing a new thing where rather than try and name the episode afterwards, we're going to name it ahead of time. I called this one Beyond Thunderdome because I was expecting serious drama based on the amount of sledging that had happened on Twitter in the week, and we've actually kept it. We've just been talking about actual things. There was some. Moultrie drew a bloody graph of macroeconomic supply and demand graph. That's like taking all of us back to school that did econ. So like
hand drawn in like 1 second. He's like, "Here's the graph, boys."
So my question is, where's my drama,
yeah,
man?
like,
Where's my
come on,
drama?
you guys are supposed to
I can't.
Well, I
believe
mean,
this for the
the
drama.
drama's been the past few days, all Echelon.
Let's create some drama. Yeah, let's move on to Echelon. So who wants to lay the law on Echelon and give us the rundown? Maybe Ghost. It seems like everybody wants to go.
I got this shit. Yeah.
Chomping.
So Imperator was the first to leave the set. But prior to that, I had
Hang on. Just pause. What did you say? Imperator?
Imperator.
Can anyone? Is this how it's said?
How do you say it?
How do you say it?
Imperator.
I've been saying Imperator. I don't know. Is that a word I should know? Sorry, man. Continue. I just I really needed to know.
They were the first ones to leave the set, but I had been getting DMs from I think 2 or 3 different people for roughly 2 or 3 weeks, just saying, "Hey, something doesn't look right here. We've looked at GitHub, we've looked at this, we looked at that." We knew it was practically a one-to-one clone of at most. They were just forking and trying to run their own thing, yada yada. Okay, whatever. It was one of these small bullshit chains, that we joined. It might turn into something, it might not. They may go on to create their own thing on top of this, which okay, fine. if that happens, great. It turned into something. That ended up not being the case at all. A lot of information was shared that started pointing to very different things. I don't remember the guy's name exactly.
Carson.
Carson something CK. Yeah,
Yeah.
is all I know. Some apparently like known prolific scammer dating back to 2013 and just across various ecosystem scamming. I mean, apparently one of his old bosses from I think it's GAW or DAW miners, something like that, back in 14, 15, 13, something like that, was actually indicted and imprisoned. And Carson managed to get away with it and not serve any time and all that. And he's just been going from ecosystem to ecosystem. Right before he came to the Cosmos with Echelon, well, according to him, Echelon is not the Cosmos, even though it's Tendermint, Cosmos SDK, and he's advertising to everybody in the Cosmos. And he forked Evmos. But I guess he went over in Harmony and did a bunch of shit over there. And then before that, it was a different ecosystem. I mean, if you just go back on Twitter, there's a trail of just tweets and ecosystem. And people are saying, what's Carson up to these days? Oh, looks like he's attacking, Cosmos now. And
so it seems like Carson is a little bit scammy. So let's review the events really that led to us even looking into it, or the Cosmos people even looking into it and uncovering all this. So how did that play out? What happened there? Something about DMs and stuff like that.
So it became DMs. I noticed something interesting a day or two before I got the DM from 360, which is the.
Well, it started with the open bribe for governance.
Okay. So yes, it was technically the open bribe, but a day before that, they pushed an announcement saying they wanted to speed up their block times to half a second. Their Evmos, which only runs at a second and has how many hundreds of transactions per block? This is Echelon with, way less transactions and all that going on. They wanted to speed up their block times to half a second. And I questioned it in the validator channel. I'm like, why? Why do we need this? Everything's running fine. There's zero reason to do this. You're telling us you want us to 10x, 12x our, bandwidth and storage and all that for the same exact epoch rewards. Does that make any sense at all? I mean, something didn't add up. And then the next day, the big news, of course, was just, let's bribe everybody for votes.
So how did that look? What was the value proposition to get those votes for people who don't know?
It was, and it wasn't just validators voting. It was the top, something like, the top 10 or top 20 or top 30, it was top ranking validators. Sorry, AC kicked. It's too loud. Yeah, basically just the richest people, whoever was willing to vote yes on this was going to get just handed a bunch of liquid Echelon. But that's
so it wasn't based on necessarily validators, right? It was the top 10 or 20 wallets by size that vote yes.
That's
will get a liquid reward.
You see all of these whales and big validators voting yes. What is that going to do? It's going to cascade down. People are typically going to follow the lead.
Yeah.
So that's and I said something in the Discord, and it just it started off. It just blew up from there.
Yourself and others took issue with that, rightly so, because buying votes is not socially great. And further to that, though, so some people who did speak up about that were, had some private conversation as well that sort of illuminated some people as to not being very nice, right?
Yeah. So, and someone who wasn't even an Echelon validator. So, and I think a comment just popped up. I'm looking at it. Is he in here? Was it Highlander? No, it wasn't Highlander. It was Crypto Crew. So
Clemens?
Yep. They were DMing 0xesh, which is the founder, operator of Echelon, whatever. They're, cult leader of all of his shill accounts. And he said, we're going to be voting no with veto on this. They're not even an Echelon validator. They're just an Osmo validator. And then all of a sudden, the rest of this DM, the response from ZRXF were like, racial slurs. Just very, yeah. You guys know what it says. I don't need to repeat it. And yeah.
So yeah, it was not very nice things. Yeah.
Yeah. Just some really, shit you just don't say. Period. Ever. Like,
which was later shared. Yeah. Yeah, so those things were, if you are interested, like those things were shared on Twitter, and you can go and find them. They weren't very nice. So there was quite a big backlash then on that subject with Echelon, and I think any validator that's, like all of the, I would say most of the multi-chain validators for Echelon ended up leaving, like the ones with known brands. Ended up leaving the chain. So, and at least there was some, fun memes that became of that. Anyway, I'm trying to find one.
that was yesterday and the day before, and I didn't see them until yesterday. But I actually, you know what? We embraced it. It's now my Twitter cover photo. Like, you know what? Yeah, 300 Whisper 300. Let's go.
Rarma didn't want us retweeting them, though. He said we were doing their marketing for them.
Yeah, and
we won't retweet it, but let's find it and just play it anyway.
Yeah, that 19-second 300 clip.
Yeah, man.
So they took it down off Twitter. They deleted it after we started embracing it, and everyone started jumping in and making fun of it. But it was Echelon Joker, that Twitter account, or Echelon_Joker.
So it no longer exists, the video? Is that what you're telling me?
Not on Twitter. Yeah, he deleted it. All of our comments still exist. I don't know if anyone else shared it. I had retweeted it and then deleted it later, but it still wouldn't exist if he deleted the original. But if you go look at my Twitter today, I just have the clip.
I can see the screenshot out of there.
Yeah. 12 seconds in. I'll share it in chat.
Oh man. I can't believe they deleted that hard work.
Yeah.
I loved that meme.
It was I know. And they had 3 different ones, but this was the best one by far.
When is Twitter going to be on the blockchain?
Lavender,
soon. How?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I liked the one where the Echelon was just sweeping away the people too. That was fun. The validators that were going.
Yeah. And then in a paragraph they were kind of stuck, yeah.
Say that again. Imperator.
Now say Evmos again, Ghost.
Evmos.
That's not what you said before. I know you said
Evmos.
Yeah,
okay,
Evmos.
Evmos. Yeah, sometimes they say Evmos.
It's
sometimes
okay.
Evmos. I don't know.
It's all good.
It's like tomato.
Yeah.
Well, it's not like rude, Frey. Last week.
What?
Wasn't it last week? Everyone was trying to say, are you saying room? What the hell are you saying?
You mean June?
Exactly.
We can do this all. I can't help it that not everybody speaks English correctly.
Yeah, the issue here is that the phrase coming from a point of a couple thousand years of history.
Well, actually,
of pronunciation.
Fun fact: isn't it that Americans specifically, a lot of your pronunciation is more locked into how pronunciation was in specific parts of England 200 years ago, and it's just kind of gone there. Whereas ours is still just
times.
Yeah. Ours is still kind of whatever it was. It's just the same old regional shit. And yeah, I have quite a nondescript Southern accent actually, as far as English accents go. It's not very remarkable.
No.
If you heard it, if you heard Highlander talk, well, Highlander's Scottish, but if you heard Highlander talk, you'd see how many different what the range is in the British Isles.
Yeah. A couple of weeks ago, right? 2-3 weeks ago, something like that. That he was on. Yeah,
it's quite good.
Can we see this?
Oh, does someone find it? No, that's not. Well, that's a different one. I didn't see this one.
This is one. There we go. We can see it together.
Sorry to everybody on podcast players.
So for everybody in the podcast, it's the this is Sparta scene, but it's got the words down the bottom. This is Echelon kicking a person that is just a conglomerate.
All 7 of
conglomerate.
us, like, validators.
Yeah, conglomerate of validator icons into the.
Yeah, we're the exit. We're the fudders fudding ourselves.
Yeah,
I mean, overall, this has to be a bullish thing for Cosmos, right? All these, like, you have a bunch of. We're finally getting recognition. That all these,
right?
all this other shit that's falling out of these other chains is now showing up here, and now we have the same problems. You gotta be Cosmos bullish on this stuff, right? Like, I mean, and
Means we've arrived.
Feels good.
We've arrived. We have all this shit like all this shit's happening, and then I mean, to the good point, you have a lot of validators that step up and like, hey, I'm not doing this shit, right? Regardless of how easy it is or whatever else, and you get this pushback, which is hilarious, and then you get Osmo, like this 309 thing getting rejected is great. I think it's hilarious, and then you have.
Did it fully get with vetoed?
I don't know if it did or not. Is it 309? I don't want to
I thought it's 309.
Is that
Yeah,
is that the gelato one?
It might be the gelato. I apologize. If it's whichever one is associated.
307 or
307, 306, whatever.
Look,
307.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but
307.
Someone is putting a lot of effort into bringing us into, the.
Oh yeah, it's gonna fail with the no with veto tomorrow.
307
Definitely.
says Rama.
Yeah.
If anybody knows, he knows.
56.34.
It's just quite good that I mean, not quite good. It's a part of growing up, I think, as an ecosystem, right? You get this kind of shit's going to come in.
This one's great.
What do you got?
Can I hire this meme guy?
Oh, I haven't seen this one yet either. Nice. Oh, look at Jacob right in the middle.
I don't see. Where's Schultze?
No. What's Jacob on that side?
Oh no,
Oh,
you
this
just
is
see his
Echelon
face.
side.
Yeah. No, you just see Jacob's face. You don't see Notion.
This is amazing.
Yeah.
Jacob's face.
Holy shit.
Oh, there's Schultze.
Of course,
All right, Lavender got in there. All right,
you've got to love the additional like meta of the fact that one of the things charging them is the Imperator logo, and the Imperator
Right.
obviously
Yeah,
like the word in Latin became the basis for it was one of the additional names given to the Roman emperors when they transitioned from republic to empire, and it's where the root of the word emperor comes from, right? And they got that name because they fucking beat the Greeks, including the Spartans, and ground them down into the ground. And yeah, fun fact about the phalanx: great military formation, really inflexible. When they first encountered Roman legionnaires equipped with short swords, they literally like wrote about it, and they were like, "Holy fuck! This is how could anybody fight with anything so fucking vicious?" And it's like, yeah, well, it won. So
there you go.
Yeah, that's what happens.
So this is the one that sparked it all.
We have another one.
This is the OG.
This is the one.
The OG. Is there software this, or somebody literally moved that little icon? They did that.
I love how the head like
switch. Yeah. Yep.
I mean, to be fair, someone's gone to a lot of effort.
Like, yeah. But then he deleted it. Like, oh, what a shame, man.
But they're all there. They're still there.
Well, it looked like he deleted it early because
he just blocked you, probably. Probably just blocked you.
I think he just blocked you. He left all his hard work up.
At first, I truly thought it was a satire account, but
I mean, honestly,
I went through it and I was like, wow, it's not.
This makes me 100% bullish on the Big Mac Index. To be honest, like this is just good stuff across the board.
We need
right?
the BMI.
It's all good towards the BMI.
Who can make that like Twitter bot? The one where you do like how many to buy a Lambo. We need the one for Telegram that's how many to buy a Big Mac.
Mm-hmm.
We should totally do that. Like just throw up a little mini fun bullshit grant bounty bonus.
Yeah, man.
So while we've got Moultrie here as well, I was actually going to rug everybody in 25 seconds, pertaining to the 90-minute rule. But I was like, we've got Moultrie here, and we actually should also just like ask a fucking question about auditing rather than also just being complete degens for an entire episode.
That's a good idea.
So it's obviously very, very, very common for projects to need to or want to get audits done before they go mainnet or sort of get out there. Like, in your honest opinion, as like, you know, a professional in the space, do you think that those audits by and large are either A, needed by the majority of projects, or B, actually catching major issues in production? Like, what's your experience of that?
Yeah, so we do primarily infrastructure auditing, but like in terms of software auditing, you do have like, if you think about just like Rust as a language, right? Like it blocks you from making a lot of stupid errors. And that's good because tons of people do it, like myself included, in other languages. And so to have like just the run of the mill, we're going to do an end-to-end test. We'll check your software based off of a few signatures. You can think like ClamAV style. I think that does do a lot of good. You're not going to ever get a 100% solution. Any auditor saying they have a 100% solution, like your code is definitely secure, is lying, and should be trusted. So I think there definitely is a place. I'm probably biased because it's my company. But I don't think that people should ever see that somebody got audited and think that this means it is safe, guaranteed. So for infrastructure auditing, it's a bit like more ecosystem specific because like on Akash, you want the provider to actually provide whatever deployment you want and like not drop that. You don't want them to manipulate what you're running, things like that, because Akash still doesn't have homomorphic encryption yet. Same thing with like DVPN. You want that node to not drop your IP address, etc. So there's a place for it all, I think, but not as extensive as I think people conceive it as.
It is quite hard to decentralized run a validator reliably at the moment.
And audit it and promise all of these things, you know.
Yeah, to like
whole staking, you know, and I'm not trying to start that whole conversation, but you know, offering say slash insurance, but you don't have proof that you have the funds, or you know, I mean, you can go down a whole rabbit hole with this. Yeah.
Well, I mean, if you want to drop some more drama per second at the tail end of the episode, I guess we could just say we talked earlier about Sybils and about, you know, a variety of other things involved, for which the solution is social consensus. That was weird. Thank you, Noel. Or like about maybe delegators, like understanding better who they're delegating to. But obviously the other bit of drama, I guess, within the group that we've been, I guess, having some debate on the value over is like the whole staking rewards thing, right? Which I think, it felt like Ghost was maybe about to mention that. And that's like,